Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, those who, by chance, decided to listen to us. And before I say a few words on the significance of what is going on here, and the Gaidar Forum is one of the most significant economic developments in this country, especially at the start of the year. In fact, it sets the core, if not the course, at least the trends for the year. But non-economic questions at the start of the year have been discussed too much at the expense of the economy. So let us discuss economy at least within the 40 minutes that we have here. Everybody has been presented here. And our photos were on our photos we were wearing ties. And why are you not wearing ties today? And I am starting with the Secretary of State, the person Alexey Valeriyevich Sazanov, who is Deputy Minister of Finance of the Russian Federation. And the fact that you are without a tie, you are ready to tell all the truth. I'm always ready to tell the truth. So you are always ready, but you don't do it. And Denis Vyacheslamovich is the taxation service without ties, a tie. Is it for good or for bad? Well, we are here in a non-standard format and discussing a non-standard format. I have asked for ties to be prepared, so if necessary, they will be brought here. Well, if necessary, let us put them on. So that depends on the course of the conversation. So our subject is the priorities of the tax system. So can I start with a lightning questioning? Alexey, could you name 3 priorities of the tax policy from your point of view, without thinking of consequences, in short words? Well, administrability, collectability, and predictability. Also, Egorov has become sadder. Oh, well. Now, I would like to ask the same question to you. So, administrability, collectability, and predictability concerns you. And what are your priorities? Perhaps on a different plane, though close to this one. Simplification, trust, and adequacy to the reality. Okay, now I have a proposals. As you submit your proposals to the State Duma, so how can you generalize what you have said? I like your priorities, but I would like to bring together what Leonid Vyacheslamovich and you, Alexey Vladimirovich, Alexey Valeriyevich, your last point was predictability. Because I think that everything else, trust, adequacy, etc., this is not something connected with administrability or collectability. It is closer to predictability. So say a few words about predictability, please. Why have I taken these pages? It's not something... I'm not making complaints. I'm complaining myself. So last year, the Federal Assembly adopted 24 laws, including changes of the tax code. Every year, about 30 years are adopted. Each law contains dozens and sometimes hundreds of articles. Over several years, we have changed thousands of rules of the tax code. At present, just what has been submitted to the State Duma, and not just the government, I also submitted a bill over 100 pages of tax code, and we are going to consider 16 draft laws which will be serve as guidance both to the tax collectors and tax payers. So I would like to ask you, do you have enough time to follow what we adopt? You know, my problem is not about following. Well, let me rephrase it. It's not not to follow it, but to observe it. But have you enough time to read it? You know what I'm worried by? It is a problem for us and for the taxpayers. We are used to the rules of direct application, and they are applied directly, but life has changed. And life is now, fortunately or unfortunately, so that any rule may be a shock for the information system. I keep returning to this subject, but I live by it, and we need to automate every word in the tax system. And I mean, not only us, but also taxpayers, because they also are in the system. And there are two planes here. How much the word is algorithm in accounting, and how much hard time we have, because the autumn session is always a stress for us. We need to apply the new rules starting with the beginning of the new year. And so our problem is about those things which transition from our words to our practical work. But I would like to ask you now, we all are now living in cloud technologies, but most taxpayers live on Earth, but not in clouds. Don't you think that we are losing contact with each other? We are over there in clouds, in the clouds, and they are on Earth. Well, we are trying to find a balance. There are a lot of taxpayers who are not ready to use cloud and digital technologies, and we always try to find a balance. We do not leave the Earth altogether. All the rules presuppose two types of providing reporting. And how many taxpayers are there who work by the hand, who do their reporting on paper? You know, the great number of taxpayers is not about clouds or not clouds. The thing is, what is now the tool for the taxpayers to do their duties? Yes, I agree. But I'm starting looking. Over the latest 3 years, we have supposed 30 new laws were adopted, which amend Article 159 article, and 15 which amend Article 165. And it's so. And when I ask why is it impossible to introduce all changes to one article by one law, and people tell me, but you know, those laws are prepared by different, are drafted by different departments, and perhaps this number of laws is caused by the fact that we think about our own comfort and not about the comfort about taxpayers. But you know, all the changes like 149 is privileges, 164. Well, but let us introduce St. George's Day, like it was in ancient Russia. There is a St. George's Day, in the spring or in the autumn, there's one day when all the amendments into the tax code are introduced, which will start to be applied next year. And people will have enough time to prepare themselves. Well, I'm going to cry. If you do this, it will be wonderful. What about St. George's Day? But you are absolutely right. But there are instructions by the government, by the president, so it is. Yes, so we'll start cleaning the fish from the tail. So I would like now to turn to you. Tell me, please, this change of legislation is good, but there are purely practical issues like pre-auditing measures. They are not included into laws, but in practice, it is a nightmare for a taxpayer, because we say if you don't do something, we will send an inspection to you. And then Article 54 comes into play, which has nothing to do with the digitalization, but which allows to evaluate. Then we have done evaluating, and we start bargaining with the taxpayer. Bargaining starts. Well, either we do this, or perhaps you will pay us that much, or you will pay that much. This is practice, so this is not law. How are we going to fight against it? Or is there, or does this exist or not? But why do we get this system of pre-inspection analysis? Well, legally it doesn't exist, but its practice is predetermined by the fact that we ask questions. So we can ask it within the framework during the inspection or before the inspection. And before the inspection, it will be much softer as regards the consequences. But your eyes have become very hard when you spoke about soft consequences. Well, I am defending my position. I really believe that it would be better to determine our processes, and your criticism is really appropriate, but you know that we have special legal capacity, and in our court, our position will be difficult. In our independent Russian court, I interrupted you, but I'm not talking about the court. We can say only good things or nothing about the court. It is my responsibility, first of all, because really we must do what we have in the tax code, but we are talking about things which are not in the tax code, things that Sazanov has not written and which I have not proposed. Well, I'm trying to answer you in the same context. I'm trying to tell you that looking at our choice, practical choice, we have the control measure of the inspection exists, and we also have pre-inspection analysis, and the controlling procedures have been made softer since 2007. A lot of measures have been taken to soften them, and it appears to me that the inspection processes, controlling processes do exist, and they must be done in the softest way possible. And so a real inspection is not a soft procedure. If we look not at the pre-inspection analysis as a whole, but at its elements. But 99% of questions are settled by one answer. So we have documents 93 or 31, which allow us to do it.
I'd agree that, but then I have another question. In reality, the procedures of the field and chamber inspections and the timelines which were set by the tax code were not changed, and I know that the terms for the VAT checks actually have been changed, and that's a good progress, and the VAT reimbursement, that's a real progress. I'm flattering you, yes, but let me compliment myself while I can. Actually, 95% of VAT will be reimbursed within 1 month. Can you remember 10 years ago? Well, then VAT used to be the biggest problem. But now, even the critics of VAT are non-existent. But still, in the tax code, we still have some timelines pertinent to submission of documents, which are originating from 1998, when no digitalization was on the table yet. We didn't know what it is. Why, actually, these rules are still intact, why these laws are still intact. And you correctly spoke about the field inspections, but why we cannot actually revisit these issues? What prevents us from revisiting these timelines? Why, actually, we cannot put an end to these continuous, endless field inspections and suspensions? Why we cannot do that right now? Well, actually, the terms are limited. We're speaking about the data exchange between the Federal Tax Authority and taxpayers. If the taxpayers are ready to speed up the data exchange with the Federal Tax Authority, then all the inspections would automatically go down. At the moment, it is limited to 6 months. The field inspection may go for 1 year, and for how long it may suspend the operation? Well, and actually, that inspection may take any reason for suspending the activity of a business. And we did so much good in the tax area, then it doesn't make sense to just praise what good we did. Let's speak about the challenges and problems. And we know that our tax service is the best one in the world. And we're not lucky to have the taxpayers that we do have. But I'm speaking about a different thing. So these are the questions of a domestic nature. And when we developed the tax code, still the tax legislation was controlled by the national legislation, or even the OECD regulations were of a recommendational nature. And do you remember the Directive 10 pertinent to VAT? And it was just a recommendation, but now, in fact, we see an absolutely different process of supranational regulation of a tax code. And the first thing we got was several instruments which are already enforced. And secondly, we are looking forward to the carbon border adjustment, but this is just step number 1, pillar number 1, and then it would go on like that. In that sense, what do you think? These tendencies and trends, when the tax authorities are subordinated to the supranational regulation. Is it boon or bane, or this is just a reality? As far as you are part of all these talks, you know that better. But when you returned last time, I think you were very much dissatisfied. You got back from Ireland, if I remember correctly. From the Netherlands. No. Glasgow. It was Glasgow, not Ireland. Okay, it was Glasgow. Edinburgh is a nice city. Glasgow is not so nice, but what is the flavor of the meetings? Well, the world had changed. Before, the tax planning instruments stayed within the country. Now they went beyond the country. They are of the international nature, when you can shift the profits and your headquarters can be placed in several jurisdictions. These challenges emerged just recently, and certainly this is reality that we're going to the supranational regulation in terms of the corporate taxes. To respond to your question briefly, this is an answer to the challenges that we have now. So, am I right in saying that you consider that as just an objective process? Either we're part of that or we're not part of that. Another question which goes to you, if we're part of that system, is it a boon or bane? Well, if we're part of that system, then we may claim extra tax base. Well, they will tell us, go and mind our business. I attended the Venice meeting of G20 where they totally neglected our requests. So we have to see whether they tell us to mind our own business and then make conclusions. Well, okay, I know that tactics. When we are taking part in the negotiations, I don't have a feeling that we are told to mind our own business. Well, negotiations in that process, this is the most pleasant part of the work. Well, partially I agree with you that this is the pleasant part, because this is up to the taxpayers who are going to implement that, to execute that, but probably that would be up to the foreign taxpayers to implement these things. Well, is it a matter of choice? Taxes would be imposed, but where they're going to be paid, in Russia or outside the country? So for the country, this is that very choice. Well, why I'm asking that question? I think that the Gaidar Forum, this is always the event, and yesterday I listened to Anatoly Chubais on TV, and he said that because of the green energy, the country may get up to $40 billion. And I remember his joyful face only in 1990, when he said that every voucher will give you several Volga vehicles, and $40 billion would not be enough in order to pay off the debts of Rosnano that he has generated. But still, what do you think? How can we become part of that system? How can we develop our own legislation? Bear in mind that tendency for making the tax policy of international nature. Well, there are common rules are being developed, at least which are embracing the OECD. And we're going to implement these international rules and standards in the Russian legislation. So we are going to implement these international rules in Russia, yes. And certainly we will have to adapt to these tax preferences which are being offered, because certainly the rules which are being developed to some extent, they would touch upon the preferential regimen which are being developed. We will have to adapt them. We discussed that with Mr. Sazanov, but Mr. Egorov, how do you see that? When are the tax services ready for that? In terms of how it works. Well, my experience shows if you want to come up with some nice solution tried to bring together all the stakeholders to understand their interest, how to distribute that. Speaking about our being members of the OECD or G20, the steering group is the most pivotal body, and we are part of that body. Next is the inclusive framework, which brings together 140 countries, which are taking all the technical decisions which have been made by the steering group. And the Ministry of Finance is part of that. At our site, we have set up an ad hoc group with the biggest taxpayers, where they raise their problems and questions. As a result, speaking about the Pillar 1, where multinational companies are being taxed by where their products are being consumed, the mining of subsoil resources has been excluded. The companies which are submitting their reports on the first and the second pillar, still we are trying to process that in a one-stop shop manner. Along with other countries, we managed to obtain the decision that the companies which primarily is located in one jurisdiction and partially is located in other jurisdictions would somehow obtain some tax deductions. And that's good. I would agree with the conclusion that certainly we can opt out of such a membership, but it means that we'll be outside the international agenda. But it would be more interesting to become part of that international agenda and sometimes setting the tone. Well, it looks ambitious, but in terms of the technical part, we are absolutely confident we can do that. Well, that's right, but you asked yourself a question in terms of the technological part. Not just we can do, but we are the trendsetter. In terms of the technology, we are in front of everyone. Germany, for instance, keeps everything on hard copies, in paperback. And so it means that we are living in different centuries, in different ages, and Germany remains Germany. Don't you have a feeling that the world, in part of the technologies, is lagging behind us? I mean the technologies of administration, the technologies that our tax authorities now have. And the world is not ready for these trends any longer. So in some spheres we're lagging behind, but here we are much ahead. Will the rest of the world be ready to adapt our standards, or will have to drop the bar? That's a very difficult question that you're asking. I don't have a clear answer to that. And by the way, within the OECD we have developed the digital maturity map, where you define the digital maturity in order to see whether you can communicate at the same level, and this is a patchwork. But how such problems are addressed at the international sites where we're participating and where we're exchanging different documents, including, for instance, the movement of money between the accounts. It's been done digitally, and you may be at the initial level, at the mid-level, and at the top level. And there are some solutions for that, and it would be strange if we do not try to be number one. That's quite normal, absolutely. And if we are good in that, but the system doesn't work, it means that the system is not good. We have to look at the realities adequately. If you offer a decision, then but it doesn't work, so it is not worth a penny. And it is true of our services which we offer. Remember how hard it was to impose the property notification systems, and now 93% are paying property taxes through their personal accounts. 93% of them do that. Well, in that case, it works. But I have a question to you, Mr. Sazanov. That's a question of the following nature. To what extent our biggest taxpayers are ready to make up with the need to incorporate the international legislation into our Russian legislation? Well, this question should go to our taxpayers. Well, but we're keeping track of that. There are habitual ways of optimizing the taxation, and all the international companies use these loopholes. And now the international legislation makes sure there are no such loopholes. Will the taxpayers like it? Probably not. Will it improve the fair way of taxation? Probably yes. Several years ago, President Putin said that you will be fed up with dust trying to get your money from the offshore accounts. And I do think that this comes true. Don't you think that all these taxpayers are bringing back the money to Russia, to the management system? They're rushing to do that.
Only those companies have stayed in Russia, only those companies with Russian roots, which work with headquarters in other jurisdictions. I'm not going to ask you to name those companies. I know them, and the others are not interested. Let us wait until they disappear. Well, this is a measurable number. I don't think it's only taxation reason. Well, we have only 10 minutes or less left, and we have only started the most interesting thing. Also, you have said that they did it via offshores in order to minimize taxes. No, it's not true. Of course, it was an important reason, but the most important reason was instability of legislation. And that's why we received the Cyprus with its English regulation, etc. The next thing is non-respect, absolute non-respect of private property in the country. Well, of course, you cannot expect respect of private property after what has been done during the privatization. It's about those 40 billion rubles due to hydrocarbons. This is also a very bad claim. It is just like the promise that everybody will get a Volga car for one voucher. It kills the trust. And finally, the absolute power of siloviki over the security agencies over the business. So as soon as a business achieves any success, siloviki come and demand either their share or take away your business. Can something be done about that? Because if we don't answer this question, I believe that the question that we discuss would be purely academic. Don't answer. You may not do this. I know. Another question, purely practical. We had a very good practice. We used to have a very good practice when it was possible to initiate criminal cases based on taxation things. They were, but only when that criminal cases were initiated, only if the taxation inspection was in favor of this. Then it was abolished. Don't you think that it would be a good thing to restore this practice? Of course, it will be. Then siloviki will come to you and not to the taxpayers. But I believe that it will be easier for the tax service to protect itself from the security agencies than an ordinary taxpayer. Vladimir Mikhailovich, I believe that this is not an easy question to answer. We understand that the criminal law system is not part of taxation procedures, and there are lots of problems. You know, the system of proof, finding out the mens rea and corpus res, then it is not part of taxation. So I'm not sure which answer to choose, because both because we have a very good qualifications in the field of taxation, because it's what we are doing all the time. But as regards criminal cases and crimes, we do not have this competence. But you see how few taxation cases are reach the court trial if they are not initiated by the taxation service. But because those criminal cases are initiated in order to take away people's businesses, and when the business is taken away, then it doesn't really mention. And now a criminal case may be initiated by the taxation service only after a certain sum, which is established by the tax code. So how in this case we can get a formal basis? For example, if a person is really a scoundrel or has not paid any taxes, because our purpose is to get the taxes and not to put somebody inside. And we have vice versa. First, they start a criminal case, and then they look if this was an error by an accountant, or is it something else? Is there such a case as an taxation offense and not criminal offense? So we have only 3 minutes left. You have 20 seconds to answer, to say something, and I will then wrap up. So a new year is starting. What do you expect from it? 20 seconds. Well, we are having a very big reform of international taxation, and all this year we will restructure our taxation legislation in accordance with those rules. So, as Lenin said, I'm eager to work. I believe that, speaking of those rules and regulations which Alexey managed, then it will concern a relatively few number of Russian companies. I believe that we should together determine our position on the first question that you have asked, because this discussion is not translated into practice, and I would like us to have some definite ideas about what we want from tax law rules. As for the tax service, we are trying to develop. We will go on developing our services, and we'll go on doing this, making things easier for the taxation. And another question. I believe that we have had a very good practice with self-employed people. When all those people came out from the shadow, you remember how it all happened. So we decided that for 10 years conditions will not change, and now everybody who was against self-employment is trying now to change something. Can we promise that for 10 years terms and conditions for the self-employed will remain the same? Because they want to have stability. I share your position, but those initiatives come mostly from deputies. But you know, the law on the improvement of the employed is now working on my desk. So I would like to wrap up. If rape is inevitable, you should relax and try to get some pleasure. So if digitalization is inevitable, you should try to do it in such a way so that it would not cause harm to the country. Otherwise, it is necessary to do for us. And in connection with this, we are trying our work, starting our work over the new version of the tax code, which would take into account the possibilities of digitalization. But the main thing will be, as you have said, to improve trust between taxpayers and taxation authorities, without reducing the efficiency and effectiveness of the tax service. That's what I have learned from you. But if we meet each other next time, though we don't know what will happen in 1 year, I would like to thank you for this talk. I hope we have managed to explain to people what we ourselves want. Because the biggest problem is that the taxpayers do not understand what is wanted from them. Thank you.